The north was frozen. All around the world stretched white and still, snow covering hills and valleys like a thick blanket. Trees stood like frozen giants, their branches heavy with ice. The sun barely showed its face, and when it did, it was pale and cold. Even the air seemed too frozen to move. This was the land of the white silence. A silence so deep, so complete that it made people whisper without knowing why. There were no birds singing, no rivers running, not even wind to stir the trees. It was a quiet that wrapped around your heart, made your thoughts feel loud, and your footsteps too big. 3 travelers moved through that silence. There was Mason, tall and wide-shouldered, with a beard like a snow-covered bush. His voice was loud and warm, and he laughed often, like a man used to hard living and not afraid of anything. Beside him was Ruth, his wife. She was quiet, with dark eyes and smooth steps. She came from this northern land, born to its cold and silence. She didn't talk much, but when she looked at you, you knew she saw everything. The third was Malamute Kid, younger than Mason, but sharp-eyed and wise. He didn't talk more than he had to, but he always seemed to know what to do. With a dog team, a frozen fire, or a human heart. They had been out in the wild for many weeks. Their sleds were loaded with supplies. Their dogs, lean and strong, pulled them over the snow-covered land, paw after paw. They had seen days of snow, nights of stars, and cold that could freeze your breath before it left your mouth. But they kept going. They had to. They were heading south, toward the Yukon, toward people, warmth, and maybe a little comfort. The days were long, the nights even longer. Food was running low. The dogs grew tired. The travelers spoke less. In the white silence, words felt too loud, like they didn't belong. Mason still joked sometimes. "If we keep walking, I reckon we'll reach spring," he said one morning with a grin. "Maybe even a flower or two." Malamute Kid chuckled. Ruth just smiled softly. They all knew that flowers were still far, far away. Then came the day everything changed. They were crossing a frozen creek. The snow looked solid, but underneath, the ice was thin in spots. Mason was riding his sled, leading the team, when suddenly the dogs slipped. The sled tipped. Mason flew off and hit the ground hard. There was a sharp crack, like a tree snapping in the cold. Malamute Kid rushed to him. Mason's leg was twisted strangely beneath him. He didn't cry out, but his face was white with pain. "It's broken," Malamute Kid said quietly. They made camp fast. Ruth built a fire while the kids splinted Mason's leg with branches and leather ties. The pain was deep, but Mason didn't complain. He gritted his teeth and tried to smile. "Well," he said, "guess I'll be doing less dancing from now on." But they all knew what it meant. Out here, a broken leg wasn't just pain. It was danger. Serious danger. With a broken leg, Mason couldn't walk. He couldn't help move the sled. He couldn't hunt. And every day they stayed meant more food gone. Food they barely had. That night, under the stars, Mason said what they were all thinking. "You've got to leave me," he told Malamute Kid and Ruth. "There's no sense in all of us dying. Take the dogs. Take the food. Go." Ruth said nothing. She just sat beside him, holding his hand. Malamute Kid stared into the fire. The flames danced like tiny ghosts. "We don't leave our own," he said simply. So they stayed. The next days were hard. They didn't move. They stayed in one place, waiting for Mason's leg to heal. But it didn't. It swelled and turned dark. Mason had fevers. He talked in his sleep, saying strange things. The food ran lower. The dogs whined with hunger. Sometimes, far in the distance, they heard the lonely howl of wolves. The wolves could smell weakness. They always waited for the right time. The white silence pressed down heavier than ever. It made even thoughts feel cold. Mason stopped joking. He barely opened his eyes. Ruth fed him little bits of broth, melting snow over the fire. Her hands always busy, but her face quiet and calm. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her love was in everything she did. One night, Mason opened his eyes and whispered, "Oh, Ruth, go with the kid. You still have a chance." Ruth leaned close and laid her hand on his chest. She didn't speak, but her answer was clear. "No, I will not leave you." Malamute Kid said nothing. He sharpened his knife, checked the sled ropes, counted the last handfuls of rice and beans. He knew what was coming. So did Ruth. So did Mason. One morning, Mason didn't wake up. His breath had stopped during the night. Quiet and final. The white silence had taken him. Ruth sat beside him a long time. Then she helped Malamute Kid bury him in the snow. The ground was frozen like stone, but they dug anyway. The sky was grey. The wind didn't blow. Even the trees stood still. They wrapped Mason's body in blankets and laid him to rest. The dogs watched quietly, noses in the snow. There were no tears, just silence, long and deep. When it was done, Ruth stood up and looked at the kid. He nodded. It was time to go. They packed the sled with what little they had left. The dogs were thin, but still strong enough to pull. Ruth climbed on. Malamute Kid took the lead. They didn't speak. There was no need. Their hearts were heavy. But they kept moving. Behind them, the white silence swallowed their tracks. Ahead of them, the snow stretched on and on. Cold, quiet, endless. But they moved forward together. Two strong souls who had faced the wild, and who still had the strength to carry on.